Decades after two cancer patients met as children, their lives were unexpectedly intertwined by fate. But before we start, please give the video a like and make sure to subscribe to Wonderbot and hit the bell so you'll never miss any uploads from us. For some people, there are few things more challenging in life than dealing with sickness. Indeed, regardless of the severity, certain illnesses can take a lot out of the stricken individual and their loved ones. However, when it comes to sick children, overcoming such problems can be a far greater challenge. Lindsey Wilkerson and Joel Alsop can certainly attest to that, as they both received a devastating diagnosis during their respective childhoods. The former suffered from acute lymphoblastic leukemia, while the latter discovered that he had a form of bone cancer. With that in mind, the youngsters became patients at Tennessee's St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Located in Memphis, Tennessee, St. Jude opened its doors in the early 1960s, becoming an important place for sick children and their families. The hospital specializes in treating childhood cancers, with staff doing all they can to help the stricken youngsters. And Wilkerson and Alsop both experienced that care firsthand. During Alsop and Wilkerson's treatment, they were introduced at a fundraiser for the hospital in 1993. The pair formed a friendship over the next few years before they went their separate ways to different universities. But in 2004, the former patients reconnected at St. Jude over a decade on from their first meeting. Throughout a person's life, they might have to deal with a number of illnesses. However, while some people won't face these problems until they're adults, there are others who have to take them on a lot earlier. As a result, there are plenty of children facing down various medical issues across the world. Indeed, as youngsters continue to deal with their respective diagnosis in the early 20th century, a specialist hospital was established in Memphis at the turn of the 1960s. Known as the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, this facility has since helped countless families during their time of need over the last 5 decades. But the idea behind it came a few years prior. While visiting a church in Detroit, Michigan, future television star Danny Thomas made a significant decision. At that time, he was finding it difficult to make ends meet for his growing family. With that in mind, Thomas then donated the only bit of cash he had to the collection box and started to pray. Thomas focused his words toward the patron saint of lost causes, St. Jude Thaddeus, asking for his financial situation to improve. Within a few days, the entertainer's prayers were answered as he received a big paycheck for a job. Off the back of that, he then made a vow to St. Jude in one of his prayers. Indeed, Thomas told St. Jude that if he got his big break in the entertainment industry, that the future star would build a shrine in his name. After that, the versatile performer got his wish and fully intended to keep that promise. So in 1957, he made the first steps in setting up a new hospital. As an American with Lebanese heritage, Thomas at that point established an organization named the American Lebanese Syrian Associated Charities, better known as ALSAC. Using the funds raised by the foundation, he eventually opened the Children's Hospital in Memphis in 1962. By naming the facility after St. Jude, the star certainly kept his vow. In the decades since then, thousands of children have benefited from the hospital services, especially those suffering with cancer. Joel Alsop was one such individual, as he was a patient at St. Jude back in 1987, and much like the other kids at the facility, the youngster and his family were in need of help after a life-changing discovery. A resident of Chattanooga, Tennessee during that period, Alsop noticed an issue with one of his arms. The right-handed 7-year-old started to find certain activities more difficult than usual, which his dad quickly picked up on. But as the problem persisted, Bob Alsop's concern for his son only grew. Joel was 7 years old and he was having a hard time buckling his seatbelt. "I thought he was just messing around," Bob told the New York Times in September 2018. "We used to play catch with a tennis ball in the den, and I saw he was reaching for the ball with his left hand. I knew something wasn't right." After meeting with a physician, Alsop's family were directed to the Memphis facility. Despite being referred to the Children's Hospital, though, the youngster didn't show any signs of fear. "None of us had heard of St. Jude, and initially I was kind of excited, even though my parents were worried," he told the hospital's website. Unfortunately for Alsop, his parents had a right to be concerned, as he was diagnosed with a type of bone cancer called osteosarcoma. This caused a tumor to grow in the 7-year-old's right arm, which explained the problems he'd been experiencing. His treatment then began at the facility. Over the next few months, Alsop received chemotherapy at St. Jude, but it didn't get rid of the tumor. As a result, his doctors began to map out their next move, looking to clear the cancer. Following some discussions, it was decided that amputation of the arm was the best course of action. I was pretty prepared for the news. Alsop continued on the hospital's website. St. Jude had been sending an osteosarcoma patient, who also had his arm amputated, to talk to me while I was going through chemo. My parents came into my room before I went to bed one night and told me I was losing my arm. Alsop then added, "I was not that upset. I cried more when they told me I was going to lose my hair. As a kid, I understood that I had to go through this amputation to get better. As a result, the youngster underwent an operation to remove his right arm before finishing up chemotherapy." Following Alsop's time in the hospital, he and his family made an appearance at a fundraiser for St. Jude in 1993. While there, the young man was introduced to another patient who was facing down some medical issues of her own. Indeed, Lindsey Wilkerson first arrived at the facility some 2 years previously. A former resident of Crane, Missouri, Wilkerson was just 10 years old when she started to feel under the weather at home. Alongside a lack of appetite and frequent tiredness, the youngster also picked up a lot of bruises. During that period, her mom was desperate to discover what was wrong, leading to a significant moment. After undergoing some tests, Wilkerson was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia in 1991. "It's still a very vivid memory," she recalled on the hospital website. "I was on the cusp of being a teenager, so I knew the gravity of it. We went home, packed, and drove all night, straight to St. Jude, as told by the doctors." Following Wilkerson's arrival in Memphis, she started chemotherapy, which lasted for more than 2 years. Her physician looked back at that time, noting just how tough it was. "I remember the terrified family," Dr. Melissa Hudson told the New York Times. "She had lots of ups and downs in her treatment, and she struggled with toxicity. She was a strong little girl." As Wilkerson's treatment continued, she made an appearance at that St. Jude function held in 1993. And after meeting Alsop at the fundraising event for the hospital, the Missouri native couldn't help but praise his character and demeanor. According to him, the young man certainly made an impression that day. Both of our families were invited to speak and share our personal St. Jude journeys at the event, Wilkerson told the New York Times in September 2018. "I remembered being very impressed with Joel. He was really cute and had a great sense of humor. However, Alsop's attitude had a far greater impact on her as time went on. When I met Alsop, I was in for treatment. I admired him," Wilkerson told Fox News. "I looked up to him. I thought he was such an incredible person. We grew in our friendship over the years." Indeed, the pair formed a friendly bond following the fundraiser, as they often met up at hospital events. During that time, though, Wilkerson started to develop romantic feelings towards Alsop. "I remember having a huge crush on him when we were kids," she admitted to the New York Times. As for the object of her affections, he said, "She was very pretty, but I was an extremely shy 13-year-old who was afraid to talk to her." Alsop and Wilkerson, however, went their separate ways a few years later, after enrolling in different universities. But despite that, the old friends both harbored ambitions of eventually returning to St. Jude in a working capacity. The Tennessee native was the first to go back, with the hospital recruiting him in early 2003. Meanwhile, Wilkerson returned to the facility in 2004, some 12 months after she celebrated her wedding day. Following the newlyweds' arrival at the hospital, her attention was directed toward Alsop, completely unaware that he also had returned to the hospital. At that point, their friendship was reignited just over a decade from their first meeting. "St. Jude saved both our lives," Wilkerson told the New York Times as she explained why they came back. "Joel and I desire to give these patients the love and care that was given to us at their age." Alsop definitely agreed with that. He added, "Coming back to a place that's so dear to our hearts has been one of the greatest honors of my life." After meeting up again at St. Jude, Alsop and Wilkerson picked up where they left off as their friendship blossomed. Along the way, the latter became a mother for the first time, giving birth to 2 children, Jacob and Audrey. As a result, the new mom's mindset while working at the hospital quickly changed. "When I became a mom, I began looking at these young patients as if they were my own children," Wilkerson told the New York Times. "I used to think, I know what they're going through. I've been there. But having children of my own shook me like an earthquake. It really changed my perspective." However, Wilkerson and Alsop's lives took another dramatic turn in 2015. That year, the mom of 2 split up with her husband, ending their 12-year marriage. Around a year later, the 2 old friends started to look at each other a little differently. Those old romantic feelings, it seems, bubbled back to the surface. "We connected on the complexities of our situations and how it changed the way we see the world," Wilkerson said of her relationship with Alsop to the New York Times. "We have this almost sense of urgency about living life, this gratitude, this desire to give back." In the fall of 2016, though, everything changed for the pair. Indeed, one evening in 2016 at Alsop's house, the pair sat down to watch Ridley Scott's classic horror film Alien. As the movie came to a close, the Memphis resident decided to profess his feelings towards his friend. After admitting that he loved her, Wilkerson responded in kind, taking their relationship to a new stage. And just over 2 years from that pivotal moment, Wilkerson and Alsop finally tied the knot in September 2018. Given the deep connection they both share with St. Jude, the wedding itself was held on the hospital's grounds. With that in mind, the facility's head chaplain, Brent Powell, presided over the ceremony. During your youth, a cancer diagnosis invaded your life, but you endured and defeated it, Powell said of the couple during the wedding. Now you're giving back, paying it forward. You are two of the most loving people I know. It only took you about 20 years to confess your love, right after you watched the movie Alien. Meanwhile, as Alsop and Wilkerson enjoyed their big day together, their respective parents reflected on everything that happened. Ginny Cook, the latter's mom, was particularly pleased that the pair finally confessed their feelings for each other, having also known the groom since his teenage years. In her mind, they were the perfect match. We've known Joel's family as long as we've known him, Cook told the New York Times. We were so pleased when they started seeing each other. He's wonderful to our grandchildren. When we arrived at St. Jude, we were told the bonds we would form with other families would be the strongest we'd ever know. And it was true. As for Alsop's dad, he summed up his feelings with an emotional anecdote. Following an incredibly difficult period in the late 1980s, Bob had one wish that he desperately wanted to come to fruition. I told a friend one day at lunch that I thought I'd maybe see my son graduate from high school, he said to the newspaper. A dad's dreams are wrapped up in his children, Bob added. So now it's 30 years later and Joel has Lindsey, Jacob, and Audrey. He has a family. My dreams have come true for my son. Following the emotional ceremony, Wilkerson and Alsop jumped into a white car, ready to start their new lives together, finally. At the end, we want to know your opinion about the story in the comments box below.